Hi, I'm John Mark. Welcome to the Beaten Zone. This podcast is about war, not from the top down, but from the ground up. It's about unearthing personal truths of war, its lessons, its costs, and how it shapes the lives of the people who experienced it firsthand. Semper Fidelis, always faithful, is the motto of the United States Marine Corps. As a kid growing up in the 80s, my first memory of the Corps was seeing Marines being pulled from the rubble of the embassy in Beirut. It was traumatic for an 8-year-old to see that. My dad tried his best to explain why it happened. Years later, I'd find myself serving in that same region, dealing with the same issues and violence. If I'm honest, even after spending years of my life deployed to the region, I still don't understand the Middle East and Afghanistan much more than I did in 1982. When you think of Marines, most think of Chesty Puller, Daniel Daly, John Basilone, and John Glenn, just to name a few. But if I'm honest, I think of the man who is our guest. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Asad Genghis Khan is a Marine's Marine. His story is one all Americans should study. His family escaped war in Pakistan in the 70s and made their way to the United States, where Genghis, driven by his love of his newly adopted home, chose to become a Marine. His life reflects the Marine's values of honor, courage, and commitment. I first came across Genghis when a friend recommended I check out his YouTube channel, Sentinel. Genghis fearlessly talks about things most of us can't or won't. It's how he gives back after years of service. I have included a link to his channel below. Check it out. Before we begin, I want to make one thing clear. Genghis is a no-bullshit Marine. He makes a number of very sharp observations during this conversation. It will indeed ruffle feathers. But I want to provide some context for you to consider as you listen. Genghis opted to remain quiet about his experiences for over 20 years. He chose to do so that the men and women he led, and the Marine Corps itself, didn't feel abandoned by one of their own while engaged in a hot fight in Iraq and Afghanistan. It would have been super easy for him to take his story to Fox or CNN while Marines were still deployed. But he didn't choose that path. For me, this speaks volumes about his character and shows him to be a genuine person. You may think he's angry, perhaps. You make your own judgment. But I believe his anger is righteous because it is rooted in a deep desire to make the Marine Corps and the United States better. His voice is essential as we think about reforms senior leadership are making at the Department of War. Part of this project is to provide a platform for the unfiltered and unscripted opinions of our guests, many of whom weren't able to voice them while they served. Today's guest gives us just that. I think you will find this discussion quite gripping. Before we begin, a reminder to please like, subscribe, or comment below if you enjoy the channel. Doing so helps the channel generate engagement needed to qualify for programs that will support my nonprofit work. As a reminder, 100% of any monetization that comes from this program will go to Operation Freedom Paws. And now, Asad Khan.
In this deadly Taliban stronghold, under the harshest conditions imaginable, he is the perfect man for the job. Lieutenant Colonel Asad Khan commands the 1st Battalion of the 6th Marines, and he leads them from the front. At a time when doubt and tension tend to dominate war news, Khan's remarkable story is the old classic. Pure warrior, courageous and compassionate, leading committed Marines to victory on the battlefield. Overshadowed by troubling events elsewhere in the world, over the last 2 weeks, Colonel Khan and his Marines have achieved greater success than any American military unit under arms since the 9/11 attacks. And his victories are neither illusion nor wishful thinking. In the hard, cruel world of war, the bodies of the dead and the wounded and captured Taliban and Al-Qaeda enemy measure the success of these Marines. And here are the numbers. At the cost of 1 Marine dead, Khan's crew has killed 83 of the enemy, and they have wrested control of this region long dominated by the Taliban. But to Colonel Khan, the loss of even that 1 Marine, 23-year-old Corporal Ron Payne, is almost too much to bear.
You did lose 1 Marine in this fight, but you've killed at least 83 of the enemy. I mean, that's pretty awesome odds.
Yeah, I don't know if I buy the odds. I tell you, having a son that's just going to the Naval Academy in 2 weeks, losing a single Marine, I get emotional about it. I wish I was there. I would gladly lay my life down for him in a heartbeat. So, and we're going to kill some more Taliban, I'll tell you that. We'll find him, we'll fix him, and we'll finish him. That's all I gotta say about that.
So who is this man, the lieutenant colonel they call Genghis Khan? In some ways, his story is as encouraging as his victories. Born in Pakistan, Khan's family fled in the wake of the 1971 war with India, eventually emigrating to the United States. A high school athlete, he entered the Marine Corps after graduating from college in New England. Almost constantly at war since 9/11, his arrival on the Afghan front has been an incredible blessing. His family hails from a prominent tribe known to all these Afghan fighters. He speaks the language. He shares the roots and religion. He understands the culture and has generated pride and loyalty from the Afghans. Khan, in short, is the perfect American to lead the battle to rid his own ancient land of the oppressive Taliban leftovers and their al-Qaeda allies. Like his own Marines, these people adore him. In his own words, here is Lieutenant Colonel Genghis Khan.
And right now we're continuing to push the enemy towards the west. And as we continue pushing towards the west, he has to deal with terrain just like we do. And the mountains get higher, and we pin him towards the mountains, and then we're looking for a decisive engagement in this area for the enemy, and the remnants of the enemy forces to find, fix, and finish them once and for all. So we can bring in our reconstruction effort here, the civil affairs teams, and the provincial reconstruction teams that we have established with 2-2 Mu up in Terran Coat, which is really going to benefit the people. And ultimately, that's our end state, is giving the people a better opportunity, a better life.
You know, a lot of people in the United States kind of going through a period of reassessment, doubt, the prison scandal in Iraq, a lot of other things that caused some people who were behind the effort to now be equivocal about it. Do you have a message for the folks back home?
I'll tell you, this is my second time in Afghanistan, and the message is quite simple. Keep the faith. We're on the right track. These people are aspiring for the same things that we are, that we take for granted at times. That's the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And we have to give them those opportunities. And that's ultimately how we're going to defeat terrorism, in my view, is give them an opportunity and give their children an opportunity to prosper. And that's going to come through education. So folks back home, I'll tell you, the Marines couldn't have done better here. I couldn't be prouder of them as their commander. As a father, I look upon each and every one of them as my own. The job they've done for our nation, our country, and for the people of Afghanistan, the sacrifices they've made are going to be written in the history books.
Okay. Hey, it's great to have you on board, and we already introduced you, so we're going to kind of go right into it. And I think for Genghis, I think one of the things that's really important to your story is kind of your origin story. It's almost central to your life as a Marine, as a man. And so I want to go ahead and talk about a time when you reflected on the first time that you saw the Khyber Pass. You were 11-year-old refugee. And then the next time you were leading Marines in a big fight with the Taliban. You know, when you look back upon that symmetry, like, what does that mean to you?
I think it means quite a lot. I mean, my family was from that area, and prior to leaving Pakistan, 1970, 71 timeframe, we lived close by. And in fact, our family house was in Abbottabad. And I don't know if you remember that name, Abbottabad. And they found bin Laden maybe 5 kilometers in a straight line away from us. It's a mountainous region. So, right close by. And what happened was in 1970, after the military regime in Pakistan, they decided to hold elections, and it was East and West Pakistan. And then a gentleman by the name of Mujibur Rahman won the elections from East Pakistan, which is currently Bangladesh. And the West Pakistanis didn't like that; they didn't want a Bengali leading the country. So consequently, they sort of pushed him out. And then the civil war started, and Bangladesh basically ceded. And so my uncle, who was pretty prominent in Pakistan at the time, by the name of Air Marshal Asghar Khan, he just recently retired, and he came out and said, "Hey, these guys destroyed the country for political reasons," and so he was put under house arrest for like 7 years, and then they started going after his brothers, vendetta type thing. And my father got caught up in that, and one night they shot up our house, and so we crossed the border into Afghanistan. They tried to get us there in Kabul. We ended up going to Iran during the Shah's time, and we lived there for about 6 to 9 months, if my memory serves me correct. And then from there, we went to England, then Spain, and then by then, my dad kind of, got it everything sorted out. And we're allowed into the U.S. And we ended up in Hartford, Connecticut. And the first place where we lived was like a project type area, right? And then finally, my father got it. He had some connections in the U.S. And then we moved to West Hartford, Connecticut, and I was brought up in a very ultra Orthodox Jewish neighborhood because we sort of have the same cultural norms, right? I mean, the same diet, kosher, and and the Muslim diet is essentially the same, right? I mean, and then, so I would do little chores for them, especially on Sabbath, and, turn on lights, put the garage down and all that stuff. And it was really good. And so I ended up in the US. But answering your question, so exactly about 30 years later, I ended up at the Turkam, it's called the Turkam border pass. And there's a picture with me standing with some U.S. Senior officials, and it kind of struck me that we went that way towards Kabul to escape, and now I'm going that way again to hunt down a bunch of people. And but for me, it was my duty, right? It's my duty. That's what you signed up for, and you do your duty. So I mean, it wasn't but there were some places like the Kabul hotel. We stayed at the Kabul hotel, and so that was pretty interesting for me. But you know what? The advantage that it gave me is I understood the terrain, I understood the people, I understood the culture, and there was trust amongst us, and I think that paid huge dividends for our operations in Afghanistan because they trusted me, and I knew how the Afghans thought. And the problem that I had was, the Marine Corps leadership is based on an acronym called JJ Did Tai Bucket, judgment, justice, and you can look it up, decisiveness. But the Afghans don't follow trust leadership, right? They follow a leadership style based on fear. If they don't fear you, they're not going to listen to you. These guys are illiterate. They're bandits. They know they have this instinct of survival that they sort of that motivates them and fuels their where their next meal is coming from. So you have to juggle these two balls, right? And quite frankly, nobody could have done it because if you try to lead them like you're leading Marines, they ain't gonna follow you. If you and so you have to be able to switch it on and off. So I think that kind of helped us immensely. And a lot of people at the time didn't really understand what the hell I was doing. And quite frankly, I didn't have time to explain to everybody, in a classroom type thing. You just got to go with the flow, and especially when you're in contact. And we had, one operation was 17 days long. We just kept fighting every day, fortunately, the mindset that we had was we were relentless, and we weren't going to let go once we latched on to the enemy, and we just kept pursuing them. So it was good. I enjoyed it.
Of course, I've done just a ton of research on you, and I follow your channel Sentinel. And one of the things that you are quoted as saying is that America is my country by choice. And to me, that resonates. What did giving something back mean to you when you raised your right hand? I mean, for me, I was raised here. I went to Boy Scouts. I just kind of followed a natural line of drift. You
Right.
took a very unique path for a United States Marine. You're like the only guy with your background that I know who served in the Marine Corps. Like, it had to have meant something different for you when you raised your right hand, given everything that you and your family went through.
Well, I mean, we owe a great deal to America per se, right? I mean, they allowed us in, and no other country allows an immigrant to lead their sons and daughters in battle. I mean, that's an incredible amount of trust. I mean, think about that, right? And so, I owed it to America to pay it back. And the way you do that is, I mean, because I was brought up in New England, there's these old New England families that could trace their lineage all the way back to the Mayflower, right? In New England. So, and for me, that always resonated with me that they could trace their family back to the Mayflower. And I wanted something similar and, just moving forward. And so my son also joined the Marine Corps. He went to the Naval Academy, and joined the Marine Corps as an infantry officer. And so to me, that meant a lot because that's servitude, right? We got to serve our country. And otherwise America does not, meet for the subsequent generations. If we don't do our duty, there's no America for the subsequent generations, maybe 2 or 3 generations from now. The problem that I see is everybody's taking out of America, but nobody's putting it back in. And it's sort of like a bank account, right? I mean, you got to keep putting something in back into America. And I'm fundamentally, I mean, I'm sold on the Constitution. And the reason I'm sold on it because it's a seminal document when it was written. If you think about it, it's basically, a group of men are saying, that we're going to live by a code that we're writing,
Mhm.
and it's a powerful document. And what I normally tell everybody is you got to accept all of it. You can't just say, "Hey, I'm a Second Amendment guy." I'm a
Right.
Fourth Amendment guy. I'm an Eighth Amendment guy. You got to accept all of it, and you have to subjugate yourself to the entire Constitution. And once you do that, and so a lot of times I have my own personal feelings on issues, but I always refer back to the Constitution. And that's our owner's manual. It's a warranty. And if we keep paying attention to the Constitution, we'll keep moving forward. And America is a powerful, powerful idea. And the idea, it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that that idea continues to flourish. And if we don't do that, and we just start listening to all these people that want to divide us, everybody says, "Oh, Colonel, you're MAGA," and all. No, I'm not. I'm not MAGA. Yeah, in my mind, America's always been great. We don't need to make it great again. It's always been great. Yeah, we've had our flaws, we've got our warts, but we work through those, right? Every country has that. And the important thing for all of us is to remain united, e pluribus unum, and from many one. And that's the power in America. That was the power in America, allowing me a commission in the United States Marines and entrusting 1,200 of their sons and daughters to me and sending me off on this mission in Afghanistan. They trusted me. And to me, that's sacred. That trust comes all the way down from the Constitution. I tell everybody, man, it's all about the Constitution. Believe in it. Just not only in parts that you like, but believe in all of it. I think that's very important.
You know, Genghis, one of the things that struck me that you and I both have administered the oath to, Marines and soldiers, especially among officers, the number of people who took an oath to defend the Constitution, they've never read it. It's always one of the things that kind of struck me. It's like they like to talk about certain parts of the Constitution, but if you really read that thing, and it changes people. As because I would always tell my officers, like, dude, if you haven't read this thing, I'm not going to administer it to you. Go
Right.
read it and come back, and then we'll
Yes,
talk about it.
absolutely. It should be required. And
Yep.
the other thing, when I became a U.S. citizen, I had to take a test. Believe it or not, back then, this is probably late 1970s, maybe early 90s, and you had to take a written test.
Mhm.
And it was all about the Constitution. They asked you questions about the Constitution, and you just study for that test. You fail that test, you're not going to get your citizenship. And to
Mm.
me, it was also powerful. I've got this issue with dual nationals. I understand the concept behind it, but the day I became an American, I gave up my Pakistani citizenship, right? Because I wanted to be loyal. You can't be loyal to two different ideals and two different countries and and all that stuff. And unfortunately, we in America now we allow until 1950s you weren't allowed to be a dual national. But in 1950s somebody challenged it, and the Supreme Court ruled in their favor. And now we're allowed dual nationals. But the problem I got is dual nationals in the military and in government. I mean, so we've got people that have, dual loyalties, and to me, that just takes away from America, right? Everybody should be focused on America. This is our country, this is our ideals, this is our Constitution, and we want the best for Americans. We want the best for our sons and daughters, so they have a bright future. I've traveled to over 100 countries, right? And I travel a great deal, and I see how the other countries are living and moving up. And I'll give you an example, okay? China is currently in the 22nd century, right? In the 22nd century with the advances in technology and all that stuff. Now, we can sit here and debate the issue, how do they get there? That's irrelevant, right? To the point. And then you take a country like UAE in the Gulf. They're in the 21st century, right? And then, I landed in the US yesterday. You look at the US, we're in the 20th century, going back to the 19th century. We've got decaying infrastructure. Over 200,000 bridges need to be renovated, right? We've got 50 million Americans that are food insecure. What does that mean? That means they know where they're getting their bag of Doritos today, which, by the way, is not healthy for you, but they have no idea where they're getting their food tomorrow. So we got to focus on Americans. We got to focus on our education system. We used to have the best education system in the world. Last time I researched it, we're like 36th in the world, So
Mhm.
everything is sort of just atrophying, and that's not the America that we want for our children. And we got to get serious about it. Now, there's a lot of forces out there on all sides. They're trying to divide us because everybody wants their ideology to resonate, right? And that's where we got to throttle back and say, hey, have you read the Constitution? Go and read it, right?
Right.
And throw a marker down. And unfortunately, we're so wrapped up in being divided that you can't have a rational conversation. And I tell everybody that it's okay to disagree. The principle of freedom of speech is built upon the foundation of disagreement. We're 350 million strong. There's probably 350 million different ideas out there and thoughts and viewpoints. And we should be mature enough to be able to sit there and have a rational conversation, without personal attacks with every American. And to me, there is no American out there that's our enemy. And unfortunately, between the left and the right and the conservatives and the liberals, we've created enemies amongst ourselves. That's not who we are. You know, we're a nation that's bound by our Constitution, and we need to promote that. We have to promote unity, United States, right? And I think that's so damn important because I'll tell you what, if we lose that, I don't give a shit what anybody says. No military is going to be able to save us. It's not. It's the power behind our Constitution. So I really believe in that greatly.
Yep. Now, going back to your days in Connecticut. Now, you went to Babson, and you can tell our listeners a little bit more about it. I know about it, but like that's the kind of school you go to where you pretty much punch your ticket. You can pretty much do anything you want, right? You can go to the most elite schools in the country. You chose the Marine Corps as your path, which I think is just wonderful that our elite institutions are producing people who want to serve in the military. What drew you to the Marine Corps and what specifically took you to the infantry?
I'll be honest with you. When I came to the U.S. and I was in like middle school, and my first day in school, teacher called upon me, and I stood up. Because we were taught when an elder speaks to you, you always stand up, right? And the class started laughing, like, "Who is this immigrant kid?" And the teacher, rather than saying, "That's the way it should be," and reinforce positive behavior, she just said, "No, sit down. You don't need to do that here." And I remember later on that day when I walking in the hallway, we used to have these hallways with lockers on both sides, and somebody, shouldered me into the locker, right? And my first reaction was turn around, I just smacked him right in the face, right? Because that's a baton of freedom in us, right? And the kid went down, his nose is bleeding, it's a mess, right? Teachers come, they haul me to the principal's office. I get suspended for 3 days because although it wasn't my fault, I went, a bit too far, I guess. So, my parents could see that I was gonna, not fit in well at the school, and especially the junior high school, right? So they took me to a school called Avon Old Farms, and I'll tell you, one of the reasons I was, for whatever my successes were in the Marine Corps, they go all the way back to Avon Old Farms. There's a boarding school. You had to play sports. There was mandatory study hall. You had to wear a jacket and tie, and all the things that you're supposed to do as a growing young man, right? They taught you discipline. You had Sunday vespers. You had to go to church Sundays and all that stuff. So Avon really molded me into the person that I am today. And then from Avon, I went to Babson. Now, I couldn't get into Babson today. I'm being perfectly honest with you.
Mhm.
Babson's really, done well for itself. But coming out of Babson, and then there's an interim period in there that I used to hang around with these two brothers. And one day, they came and got me and said, "Hey, your parents want you home." I was working at a gas station. In the summer, everybody had jobs, right? So I was working at a gas station, pumping gas. In those days, we used to pump gas, and then try to upsell you oil and windshield wipers and all that happy horse shit. And so my friend comes and says, so I thought maybe something happened to my grandfather. So I hop in, I tell my boss, "Hey, I got to go," and he's basically joined the army. So he talks me into joining the army. So I was like, "Shit, he's my best friend. I'll do it." So I joined the army. Little did I realize that he's getting an extra stripe. It's the buddy program, right? So he got automatic PFC. Anyway, so I go to boot camp at Fort Dix, New Jersey, and I kind of enjoyed it. It was good. It wasn't that challenging for me. It's just do what you're told. And then from there, I got assigned to Fort Rucker, Alabama, and my MOS was Flight Operations Coordinator. If I remember correctly, it was like 71 pop pop. And basically every day I'd hop in a Huey and they'd go drop me in an LZ and I sit in the Connex box, monitor the radios. And it was the warrant officer candidates. They're taught to fly and everything. It was their area land nav course. So they'd come and land and, I could hear the instructors chewing the pilots out and all that stuff. And I'm just sitting there with a map. He'd come verify his location, he'd take off. And then they'd come get me in the evening and I'd go back. And I'm thinking this sucks. So I transferred to the National Guard, Connecticut National Guard, and I went to Babson. So I drive, Babson's in Wellesley, Massachusetts, and get all the way down to Hartford's about two-hour drive, right? And I'd have to drive 2 hours to go to my drill meetings, and this sucked. It was a bunch of fat guys from Vietnam. This is probably right around 78, 79 time frame. and they're just kind of just hanging out, right, sleeping underneath helicopters, and I'm like, screw this, it's not worth my time. So I stopped going. I started getting letters from everybody, hey, you're UA, you're AWOL, we're gonna court martial you. So I was thinking, okay, now it's getting serious. So I go report to my unit, and my XO brings me in, and he just chews my ass. I said, sir, I got nothing. It's not the military. I love the military, but we don't do anything. I'm not driving 2 hours to come and skate. I don't need the money and all that shit. So he said, hey, you ever thought about being a Marine? Because he was a former Marine that went to the guards, right? So I said, I haven't. He said, well, maybe that's what you need to do, right? So all I'm thinking in my mind is he's going to transfer my contract to the Marines, and we'll see what happens. So they transfer my contract to the Marines, and then when I graduate from Babson, then the Marines come knocking because they need a warm body, right? And I was a college athlete. I played lacrosse in college, and I did okay academically, right? I wasn't a rocket scientist, and so the Marine Corps came knocking. So I said, you know what? I'll do my 4 years and I'll move on. And 4 years turned into 20 years. And when the time came to at 20, year mark, it was time for me to go, honestly. And I decided way before that I was going to retire because I was just tired of, and we can go into that, tired of the hypocrisy at the senior ranks, right? Because people talk a good game, they talk about honor, courage, and commitment, but they don't live it. They turn into charlatans where it's all about their own careers and how they manage that. And quite frankly, they don't give a shit about the troops. They're just a number, right? And I'm not everybody, but there's many officers like that. All it takes is one or two,
That's
to
right.
screw up the system. And unfortunately, the Marine Corps went down that route.
Yep.
And you can see it coming because when I joined the Marine Corps, my first so I reported to 7th Marines, after I got done with OCS, TBS, and all that stuff, and IOC, infantry. So I went to 7th Marines, and I checked in, and my regimental commander was Colonel J. Vargas, Medal of Honor recipient. Now think about this, a second lieutenant walking in, reporting to the regimental commander, who's a Medal of Honor recipient. I mean, we read about this guy, right? So anyway, really nice guy, really, really top-notch officer. But the Vietnam generation. So from there, they sent me to 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. So I go check in, you're in your alphas and all that stuff. And the XO tells me, hey, be by the pull-up bars at noon. So, and all Marines have their PT gear, right? And the rumor control was the battalion commander takes you to run and thrashes you. And if you keep up with them, you're going to go down to platoon. If you don't, you're going to get some staff job. And luckily, I was gifted. I could always PT pretty well. So, I meet the battalion commander at noon, and he takes me for a run and thrashes me. I keep up with them. So I go down to, Bravo Company, 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. And from there, I went to the Marine Corps Recruit Depot, right? So I do my tour in the infantry battalion. So I'm thinking, now, keep in mind, I had no idea what California is like, right? So all I'm thinking is California is beaches, surfboards, and all that shit. Drive across the United States, and it's mountains. And I'm thinking, holy shit, what did I get myself into? I should have probably gone on the East Coast. But anyway, so from there, I go, I get orders to the Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego, right? Thinking, yeah, this is skate, some marching and stuff. And drill instructors train recruits. Little did I know that they come back up to Camp Pendleton for the field portion of it. And there's a mountain called Mount MF. You can decipher that. Or the Grim Reaper. And you got to climb this thing. So I ended up doing it 15 times because I did 15 cycles. I mean, that's my claim to fame. I did 15 different companies down there, and I never lost a DI. I never covered anything up, but my view was, a lot of officers would just, look over windows and try to catch them. And my view was, listen, I'll always be around, and eventually they'll get used to me. And as long as I'm around, they're not going to do anything stupid. And that was my leadership style, right? So I was always around. And so, evidently they said, I helped graduate over 5,000 Marines. But I really enjoyed that tour. It was so pure. It was these, chunky kids coming in, for whatever backgrounds, and you just work them hard, and then they graduate, and the parents don't even recognize them. Graduation day. So it's a powerful testimony of how the Marine Corps changes you. Now I can compare the Army boot camp with the Marine Corps boot camp. The stress level in the Marine Corps boot. Now physically they're probably both about the same, right? But the stress level in the Marine Corps boot camp is at another level. I mean, it's just the volume is much higher. And so I really enjoyed that tour. And then from there I went to the company grade school called Amphibious Warfare School in Quantico, Virginia. I did that, and then from there I was assigned to the Royal Saudi Marine Forces in Saudi Arabia. So it's like 1990, 91 time from right after the war. So we went over there and we were advisors to build the Saudi Marine Corps. And I enjoyed that, did that for a year. And then after that, I came back to 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines as a company commander. And I stayed in that battalion 3.5, 4 years. I was a company commander, battalion OPSO, battalion XO, and I loved that battalion. It was really good. And from there, I was selected to go to the Naval War College. Went to the Naval War College, and I was a knuckle dragger, honestly. Because I couldn't write. I just spoke in a typical infantry, grunt language, and my writing skills atrophied. And so I used to hang out with this Ranger guy who retired as a 4-star. I won't mention his name. Good guy. But he was like a step faster than me in running, right? And I was maybe like 10 pounds stronger in the gym. So we'd always, push each other. It was fantastic. So one day I'm lifting weights, and this Marine colonel comes up to me and goes, "Hey, Genghis," he goes, "Are you going to apply for the School of Advanced Warfighting?" Oh, I had no idea what it was. I never even heard of it. I was like, I have no clue what you're talking about. So he explains it to me. He goes, I said, "Sir, I'm barely making it to Naval War College, and you need to apply, because if you don't apply, you're increasing somebody else's chances." He goes, "Don't sell yourself short. You're just as good as anybody else." So I said, "Okay, I'll do it." So I go through all the interview processes, and they select one person out of Naval War College. So my
Wow.
final interview, they asked me, "Why do you want to go to SAW?" And my whole thinking was, if I get this, the Army's equivalent is SAMS,
Mhm.
that if I get this designation as a planner, I can get down to a Marine Expeditionary Force, Corps level headquarters, and I can work my way down. It's closer, closer to the troops. And they said, "Well, everybody else wants to go joint duty or be a general's aide." And we can come back to this point. It's a very important point of what the fundamental problems in our military are. It all has to do with Goldwater-Nichols Act of 1986. Because for you to become a general officer, you need a joint designation. So everybody's pursuing a joint designation. So all of a sudden, staffs become far more important than troop time. And I did an episode on that. If you go back to harken back to World War II, generally a general officer would have about 40% of his career was with troops. Now it's down to 20-25% because
Really?
everybody's going. Yeah. So it's insane. So anyway, so I get selected to go to the School of Advanced Warfighting. And I go there. It was a good school. We did a lot of reading, a lot of planning. We traveled to various battlefields, and it was good. It was good. And from there, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get orders to one of the MIFs. Well, that didn't happen. I got orders to the MACTAF Staff Training Program, which is the Army's equivalent, like the BCTP. And I'll tell you again, going to the drill field kind of improved my personal standards. Going to MSTP improved my intellect, right? Because I became an instructor. So I had to teach division and corps level classes and planning and operations. And then from there, I had to also was tasked by my director, who was just one of the most brilliant people that I'd met in the Marine Corps up to that point, tasked me to write. The Marine Corps didn't have its own planning pub at that time, so he tasked me to write the Marine Corps planning process doctrinal publication. And I told him, I said, "Sir, you got the wrong guy. I'm an infantry guy. Find one of these aviators who are smarter." No, he said, "No, you're the right guy." And so I commenced the writing. Now, a lot of it had been written, but nobody could push it across the finish line because they're all arguing about stupid shit, like, what does center of gravity mean? What does this mean? They're just in these esoteric debates. And they give you a core writing team of contractors, and we got it across the finish line in 3 months. I got it signed, and everybody's ecstatic. This thing finally came to life. And then I got called back in by the same director, and he said, and he used to call me my son. He said, "Well done, my son." He goes, "Now I want you to write Marine Corps operations."
Wow.
Sir, you got to be shitting me. Give it to somebody else. He goes, "No, you're the right guy." And that pub had not been written, right? So I'm thinking, holy shit, we got to start from scratch. The same writing team, we kind of knew each other. And I pulled up an old Army FM operations field manual about operations from like the 1930s, right? Somebody written. And I'm reading it and I'm thinking, holy shit, tactics don't change. Geography changes, leadership changes, weapons change. For a frontal attack is a frontal attack. An envelopment is an envelopment. Double envelopment is a double envelopment, right? Flank attack is a flank attack. Infiltration is infiltration, right? And so I basically presented that to my team. I said, "Guys, we got to take the thing and just wordsmith it to change, add expeditionary operations and MAGTAF, because the Marine Corps is big on Marine Air Ground Task Force, which is really idiotic because the Army is an AGTAF, right? Army also does Air Ground Task Force thing, but we're sort of hung up on this moniker. And so we wrote that, then we took our amphibious doctrine and just changed it to, include that in there, the expeditionary operations. We took our aviation doctrine and our logistics, we put it all together, and the Marine Corps operations was written, and then it got signed off. So this was like huge. The Marine Corps has a planning doctrinal manual and it's got an operations doctrinal manual, right? And so then after that, so I got orders to 2nd Marine Division. I was command selected to go down a battalion. Now, at the time, there's like 8 battalions a year would open up. So I was one of the 8, but you had to like sit, in the bullpen for a year until the actual rotation happened. So I went down to 2nd Marine Division as a plans officer, and I'd work on a vault all day long, basically servicing the various division level plans, for various contingencies that we would be involved in. And it's not really that simple because it all has to do with the TIDFID, right? Time, phase, force, deployment data, that you have to keep it updated with units and number of people and, equipment and all this, because for the lift, sea lift, air lift, and all that stuff. So it takes a lot of work if you do it right. And that's what we were focused on. And one day, my gunny comes in. He goes, "Hey, sir, turn on the TV." Turn it on. We see the 2 airplanes hit. And I knew I was gone because all this time I'm also a foreign area officer because of my ethnic background, my language skills, and all that stuff. And while I was at MSTP, I'm also supporting Coalition of Special Warfare for counter-drug operations in Pakistan. Now, we weren't going on operations, but we're going out to Pakistan, Afghanistan border areas and the coastal regions to make sure they had all the resources that they needed. So I kind of knew what the hell was going on. And so I got sent down to Tampa as a planner, and we commenced the planning. So that was my sort of introduction to this was probably around September 14th of 2001. So about 3 days, 4 days later, I was gone, and I had to drive down because they couldn't get me on an airplane because by the way I look. I kid you not. I mean, that's, you know,
Those were crazy days, Genghis, and I've never experienced anything like that. I hate hearing that, that anyone had to go through that kind of discrimination, but particularly someone who was serving the country and getting ready to go be a very key figure in the early phases of the war, which is what we're going to talk about. We're going to break this thing up into 2 episodes.
Okay.
And in the next episode, we're going to talk about, they make movies about special forces guys that go into Afghanistan and do things, and hats off to those guys. That was awesome. But like, there were people like you who were in theater very early doing just incredible things. And we're going to talk about that in the next episode. Before we start moving towards your, time in command of 1st Battalion, 6th Marines, which will be the bulk of what we talk about today. There is one thing I did want to talk about, kind of about the Marine Corps has a reputation for instilling a very strong sense of identity into its personnel. The identity of being a Marine is why you guys don't wear your branch insignia like we do in the Army. You don't have unit patches. But being Pakistani-born Muslim Marine officer is kind of unique. And does the Marine Corps do a good job of bringing together people from different backgrounds into a high-performing organization?
Yeah, the Marine Corps is very unique in that regard, right? Because, and you're absolutely right, we don't wear patches and badges and all that stuff that the Army generally wears. And there's merit in that also, right? I mean, especially when you get into higher echelon type units like the Rangers and Special Forces and all that, right? But in the Marine Corps, we really don't. MARSOC, they kind of wear a pin now. Force recon guys would have the scuba bubble and the jump wings. That was about it, right? Everybody else you're the same. People don't even know who, unless they know that you're MOS, they don't know who you are, basically. So when I joined the Marine Corps, I'll tell you what, we do a damn good job in ripping apart the identity you bring to the recruit depot or OCS. We just tear you down to your bare minimum where you're just a freaking amoeba. And then we rebuild you into what the Marine Corps needs and requires. And we do a fantastic job, I believe, especially on the enlisted side. And then we inculcate you with our code, honor, courage, and commitment, and the 2 words Semper Fidelis. Now, I did an episode when Secretary of War Hegseth spoke at Quantico, and he keeps talking about warrior ethos, but he only talked about physical fitness, accountability, and standards. Okay, and no beards. Well, if you shave off somebody's beard, does that make him a warrior ethos? It doesn't, right? If somebody's a really good PTer, does that make him greater in warrior ethos? So I started thinking about it. So I went and did some research on what does warrior ethos really mean. It's the code and the principle that drives you. In the Marine Corps, it's very simple. It's 2 words: Semper Fidelis. Army's got about 4 bullets that they follow. So then the next thing I started thinking about is, how do you instill warrior ethos in a unit? Easier said than done. Is it just iron your utilities and go PT every day and you're a warrior? Bullshit. You're not. And so I looked back in my notes, and back in 2003, I presented a class to the battalion on warrior ethos. I mean, think about that. 22 years back, we talked about the same stuff. And how do you do it? And there's an episode on Sentinel about that. And the way you do it, it just takes an incredible amount of work to build that ethos. You can't just talk about it. It's not like, it's sort of the way, the analogy I use is, you can sit there and read Muscle magazine all day long, but until you get in the weight room, you ain't going to put on muscle, right? And unfortunately, a lot of people in the Marine Corps, went down this road that, hey, just read books, right? So everybody's reading books because Mattis came along and he said, oh, I have a library of 3,000 books. So in my mind, shit, I'll beat you on that. I'll get a library of 3,500 books. Is that going to make me better? No, hell no. Because not only do you have to, and I'm not against reading. I've read, just about every book out there on the military, on tactics and history and all that. What I'm talking about is, once you read this stuff, you got to sort of analyze and synthesize it, and then you got to go out and then apply it.
Mhm.
That's where we fall short. So as a company grade officer, when I came out of the infantry officer school, yeah, the battalion commander took me on a run and tried to crush me. And then I had a shitty company commander that didn't even want to train. So he'd go out there. I remember I was a company XO, and I went out to the field, and the entire company's laying down sleeping. So I'd shove them. I was like, what the hell are you guys doing? Get up. We're supposed to be training. Oh, no, sir. Company commander said we got to sleep. Why? Oh, because we're going to do a night attack tonight. Well, we should be rehearsing, right? You should be rehearsing. And I was just living, And I jacked up that company commander. I said, what the hell are we doing, sir? The battalion commander comes out here, you're going to get fired. And guess what happened? Battalion commander shows up. Boom, he's gone, right? So my point is, this guy, so it's incumbent upon the company commander to train the lieutenants how to train. There's no school in the Marine Corps that teaches you how to train. IOC puts you through training, and whatever you pick up and absorb, you take it to the Fleet Marine Force. But then they leave it up to the company commander. So if you get a good company commander, you're going to be a shit hot trainer. And so that was a fundamental issue, right? So when I came in the Marine Corps, it was all about standards, right? And nobody really cared who you were, what's your ethnic background, as long as you could perform. And I never paid attention to it, honestly. I never did, because to me, any form of discrimination or segregation is really on the other guy. I know what the standard is, and I applied that standard to such a high degree that other people couldn't keep up. You see what I'm saying? So if the Marine Corps standard was X, mine was triple X, right? In everything, in work ethic and physical fitness and mental toughness. And when I retired, I had 210 days of earned leave. That's 7 years of leave. And little did I realize you can only cash in 60 days. So it didn't have anything to do with cashing in the leave, right? So fine, keep the money. I don't give a shit. But as you move up in rank, so the Marine Corps does a very good job in assimilating you and inculcating you with, the core values and Semper Fidelis. We could do a better job in training. But so as you move up in rank, I can only speak to the infantry. It's tough in the infantry, as it should be. It's not meant as a joke. And I used to always tell the Marines and my officers, you never want to get on a plane or a ship and say, I wish I had done this. I wish I had done that. Goddamn, do it. Because if you say, I wish, you just done a great disservice to your Marines. So that's the first part, right? So it's very high intent, standards driven culture. But as you start moving up, right? And it comes to about the 10-year mark, I think, in all services, because you're picking up major, and that kind of gets you to tenure to 20 years, right? If you do a good job as a major. And that's when you become political, right? And to me, you start becoming a muffin head, right? Because you start gaming it, right? You start making decisions that are in your best interest rather than the unit's best interest or the Marines' best interest. And as a major, that seed gets planted. As a lieutenant colonel, the plant comes up, it starts flourishing. And you can see lieutenant colonels You have lieutenant colonels in the Marine Corps that wouldn't take their units out to do live fire training, or live fire training would be getting the prone position, all rounds downrange. That's our live fire training. Let's come back. My standard was I expected my infantry companies to be able to conduct a night attack, live fire night attack. Now you can't do that. You just leave your barracks area and go conduct a live fire night attack. You're gonna get people killed. So it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of training, right? And to build that confidence, because my view was if you could do it at night, you can certainly do it at daytime, right? And I knew it was risky, right? And even I had some senior officers saying, Genghis, what are you doing? Well, sir, I'm training them for war. That's what I'm doing. And so that's when I started noticing, okay, there's a disconnect here in really what we portray ourselves to be and who we really are.
Mhm.
I didn't give a shit, and we focus on training because I didn't want to ask that question. I wish, right? And we worked them hard. And 1-6, I'll tell you what, that moment in time, there wasn't a better battalion in the American arsenal than 1-6. The things those Marines did, I don't think anybody else could have done it. They endured. Each one of them lost 20, 25 pounds. They never changed their utilities. We stayed in the same utilities because we were traveling light. We're up in the mountains. We slept in the dirt. I was just talking to my son, the longest I slept in that 100-day period was 2 hours. The rest of the time, I just nod off and, because you're listening to the radio and, you wake up and you don't know how long you slept for. You know that feeling, right?
Yeah.
So then as you start moving up, the politics come into play, right? And that's when shit starts happening because there's a culture in the Marine Corps of these guys that are chubby, out of shape, and somebody else shows up that's really pushing the envelope, and you become a threat to them, right? I was counseled in combat that I should stay back at the FOB in my COC rather than be out there with my Marines. I mean, you got to be shitting me. Think about this. I considered my Marines like my sons. What father wouldn't be out there with his children? But you tell them, hey, go fight. But that's the type of leadership that I experienced. And the reason that happened was because in the 90s, there's this group of officers in the Marine Corps that walked around with books, right? And their focus was, hey, I've read so many books. I'm the smart guy, right? Well, you didn't get out in the field and apply everything you learned. So that's the first part. And the second part is you're always bucking to go on a staff, be next to the flagpole, right? Because of joint designation, right? So you don't have the troop time. You don't know what your troops are capable of. I did. I knew that. I knew when to turn it off, right? I mean, it's really that simple, and I could push them. And the reason they would follow me, because I was there with them, right? I was there with them. And to
Yep.
me, that just speaks volumes of everything, right? And it inspires Marines. I had a Marine that wrote, I just got done writing a book, right? You know about that book?
No.
So I'll just paraphrase it. So this young Marine sends me this writer. So in my book, I don't want endorsements from general officers. I don't want that. I want endorsements from my Marines because that book is about them, right? And so one Marine sent me an endorsement, right? And he basically said that that we got ambushed and he's assaulting, and all of a sudden he sees the battalion commander running past him, right? Without a helmet, without a flak jacket, without a camelback, and assaulting up this mountain. And he said, this guy is a crazy MF, right? That's the way he viewed it. So, and to me, that's the highest accolade that one could have, right? I mean,
Yep.
it's just fantastic, right? So,
When can we expect your book to be out, Genghis?
in the next 3 or 4 weeks, I mean, it's done. It's in final editing and formatting, so it should be out soon.
Well, that's awesome, man. I'm looking forward to that. Ooh, I want to talk about 1-6 because that's the setup to the final part of the discussion where we're going to go into the great detail about some of the things you're talking about with the politics and the way that the Marine Corps kind of responded to, your unit success. That's a huge critical part of this conversation.
So I took over 1st Battalion 6th Marines in March of 2003. Now you got to remember, right around that time, everybody's going to Iraq, right? And the reason 1-6 didn't go to Iraq because it was in Okinawa, so it wasn't slated to go to Iraq. So it was the only battalion that was left back at Camp Lejeune, right? And the battalion was completely gutted. We gave up. So back then, the battalion is probably around 800 some odd people. It's not a BLT. BLT is about 1,200. And so we got gutted and we gave about 178 Marines were pulled out of the battalion and sent to other battalions to plus them up to go to Iraq. right? And this unfortunately, this is the bullshit game that headquarters Marine Corps plays, right? And it's a damn disservice because this sets you up for failure. And then to replace those 178, we got about 300 non-deployables. And I'm supposed to train these guys to go to Afghanistan, right? Out of 71 sergeants in the battalion, I only had 18, right? All new staff officers and chiefs, right? All new company commanders and a new crop of lieutenants, right? And then all the way up to deploying a month before, we got about 400 Marines to offset the 300, right? The non-deployables. The problem with the non-deployables was there's no point taking them out in the field and training them because they got a morale issue, right? Stop losses going on, and for whatever reason, medical reason, whatever reason, they couldn't deploy. So I came up with a system saying, okay, we will have maintenance platoons. So when all these barracks have emptied out, so we had a formation with Sergeant Major called out, okay, who's a carpenter, plumber, electrician, welder, raise your hands. They did put in a maintenance platoon, and their job was to go around Camp Lejeune and fix barracks, right? That's what they did. And they loved it. They loved it because, they're learning a trade and, when they get out and all that stuff. And then we took the Marines that we had and we focused on training. So the first time I went out there to do an operational readiness evaluation for all our crew serve weapons, everybody failed. I mean, think about that. I'm standing on the range going, holy shit, what the hell's going on? Come to find out is when a new Marine comes out of School of Infantry, young private PFC, guess what they do? They give him the heaviest weapon, the squad automatic weapon, the M249. Well, they'll give him the M60, right? The 240 Golf later on. And this kid has no idea. He's just trying to figure his way out. So we reassigned all the weapons, right? To make people understand, hey, this is the most important weapon you have. And I've got a great picture in the combat somebody took that all my saws are online engaging the enemy, suppressing them. That was fantastic, the way it should be. But the bigger problem was we had no SOPs as a battalion, infantry battalion. So, fortunately, given my background with the MACTAF staff training program, and I had a pretty good OPSO and an EXO, we got to writing SOPs. So we spent weeks, writing the SOPs, but it's not only writing the SOPs, it's also implementing them, right? So the Marines understand what the hell you're doing. And then we set up a combat leaders course because all those courses got shut down, and our staff NCOs and Sergeant Major taught these courses, to make sure we trained our own in-house training. And normally, so the battalion was, it was a nightmare, right? And then we got designated as a battalion landing team, right? Now, a battalion landing team all of a sudden mushrooms up to about 1,200 Marines. You get an artillery battery, you get a tank platoon, you get an AV platoon, you get an engineered platoon, you get a reconnaissance platoon, right? And your mission set changes. Rather than a conventional infantry battalion, you've got a helicopter-borne raid company, you got an amphibious boat company, raid company, and then you got a mechanized company, right? That operate as companies doing raids and all this stuff, right? Which we can have a side discussion if you want. I've got opinions on that too. But so we had to rewrite all our SOPs. Now think about that. So we just got done writing SOPs as an infantry battalion. We had to rewrite them for a BLT, Special Operations Capable. That's what we advertise. The problem is this. Now, the Marine Corps does, to its credit, we've got a group called a Special Operations Training Group. It's a cadre that will come and train you, give you initial classes, allow you to train your Marines, and then they come back and evaluate you, right? And they're very good. They're fantastic. But the problem was the Muse focus was getting their SOC qualifications, Special Operations Capable qualifications through SOTG. That's all they give a shit about, right? My job was to, this compressed timeline. Normally you get 6 months. We had 3 weeks. 3 weeks, right? We had 3 weeks to form as a BLT. So I'm getting all these Marines, all these units coming in. That you get 6 months to, sort of apply your SOPs and make them into a cohesive battalion landing team. We got 3 weeks. And all of a sudden we go into this special operations capable training pipeline, right? And so, it was tough. We just, it was like, not even a fire hose. It was freaking tsunami coming at us, right? And everybody had to stay focused. And I'll tell you what, we fired over 1,000,556 rounds. One of the benefits of staying behind was you had all this ammo that was available, right? We fired over 300,000 link rounds, and all the ranges were available. So we just basically stayed out and trained, right? To do that, live fire night attack. It was very important. And so we ended up firing using 2.5 times allocation of a mu. Think about that. And I remember my S4 would come up to me. He's like, "Hey, sir, we're going to get in trouble. We're just shooting." I was like, "Don't worry about it, man. By the time they figure it out, we'll be gone." Back then they did it on like Excel spreadsheets, right? Now there it's all computerized. And they never figured it out. We were gone, right? Because we had a mission. But the issue that we had was that all our Humvees, all the up armored Humvees were sent off to Iraq, and we got left with these motor pool queens, right? I mean, these broken down crap. But my maintenance platoon came in handy, right? So they worked on the Humvees. Now, the conventional thinking is, hey, let's just put sandbags in them, to protect the Marines. I was like, bullshit. We went out, got steel plates. We tested them on a 81's mortar and a Claymore mine, and the steel plates withheld. And we up armored them ourselves, floorboards, side panels, and stuff to protect our Marines. And I remember some master sergeant came down for the inspections. You always get inspected, right? He's like, "Sir, I need to report you for illegal maintenance." And I remember sitting in my office looking at this guy, and I'm thinking in my mind, he's not going to Afghanistan with us. So I was like, "Hey, Master Sergeant, I know what we did. Get out of my office." So he went to Sergeant Major complaining that, Khan just threw me out of his office. But, to me, it's irrelevant because my Marines' lives were far more valuable than getting reported. I didn't give a shit. So we had a lot of work to do, and the Marines did fantastic. SOTG at the end said it's probably one of the best units I went through because of their intensity, their warrior ethos that I was talking about, right? The physical fitness, the toughness. But when we got into combat, we fell short. And if you'd like, I could go into that. So we transited Expeditionary Strike Group, ESG, which is another fancy name really for an amphibious ready group. But this was a new concept because the MU commander could be the ESG commander, for ground type operations, and the Navy could take. It was just bullshit. It was just dog and pony shell game nonsense. And nonetheless, so we stopped in Albania, did some training there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went to Malta, and I never understood this, to give the Marines liberty. We haven't done shit, and but we had to do a port call in Malta, a couple of days there. And then we went to Qatar, offloaded there, and then we started flying into Candor. Right now, I knew all this stuff because of my previous tour that we'll talk about in the next episode. And in Candor, so we started training again as soon as we landed. We'll get out to the ranges. I knew where the ranges were and all that stuff. And we got out there, started training. And then we did the left seat, right seat with the Army units. Right, the Army units had been operating. I want to get my NCOs out, and they went out, did left seat, right seat. Just to get them familiarity and all that stuff. But the important distinction was because I knew the ethnic groups in Afghanistan. Before, units would go out to the front gate of CAF, Kandahar Airfield, and pick up their Terps, right? So you have this guy, you don't know who this guy is. You have no loyalty, no camaraderie, none of that shit. I brought in Terps with us. There's about 40 of them. We brought in, every squad had one. And I brought them on base to stay with us, to live with us, build that cohesion. And that was very important. And the other thing that was important was they were all from the local area. They're all Pashtuns. So when we went out to this hinterland, people identified with them.
So these guys weren't like U.S. contractors. You went out and...
Well, the MU got U.S. contractors, which were Panchiris, Tajiks, and Uzbeks and all that stuff. And there's ethnic rivalries that go back thousands of years, right? They never understood this shit.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, so it was counterproductive. So we had, really solid Terps, and a lot of them I brought to the U.S., and they're doing fantastic later on. So we did that, and then MU came up with this mission. Now, you got to remember, in the MU's mindset, they're advertising the MU, right? They think they're an Army brigade equivalent, which is complete freaking horseshit, right? A MU only has a BLT, Battalion Landing Team Reinforced. I get it, okay? But they like to fight them as companies, right? The helicopter company, the boat company, they're in the ocean in Afghanistan, so the boat company became a straight leg infantry. And the problem is they don't have enough lift either. So we put the boat company in 7-ton trucks, which are too damn big for Afghanistan, but that's all we had, right? And then the mech company ended up being the same because you couldn't drive our AAVs. They're still on ships in the Indian Ocean. Our tanks were too damn big for Afghanistan. We left them on ship, which required more Marines to leave behind to take care of them so they don't rust and all that stuff, right? So the plan was they wanted to fight as a MEU with these companies and stuff. Complete horseshit. Once a MEU is quite relevant as long as it's tethered to an amphibious ships, right? Because they can
Right.
launch from the ships and come back, right? Quick
That's
raids and
so
that type of.
just for like, because I have a very Army heavy crowd, just to make sure, and most of my majors and above should have been listening in command and staff, but in case they weren't, the way that the MEU is supposed to operate, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that your command element is 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 at sea, and that your BLT is goes out and conducts raids, goes out and conducts security operations, but you as the BLT commander are running the show on the ground. The MEU is there's no scenario where the MEU commander would be directing movements of companies, right? That would be the BLT commander's job.
Yeah, so his job is really, adjacent and higher, right? Coordinate with the Navy and whoever we're working for, NAVCENT, whoever we're working for, so he coordinates with them. But the problem is once everybody goes ashore, they start getting into the BLT's business, right? And
Right.
my staff, honest to God, was just operating at a different plane. Our OODA loop, John Boyd's OODA loop,
Yep.
right? Cycle. Ours was much tighter and much faster, right? Where theirs was just, took them time. And they relied so much. I never got an operations order the entire time I was in Afghanistan. I got PowerPoint slides, right? But I never got an operations order. I used to make my staff write an operations order, and they hated it. Right.
So they
But the
would
reason
give you orders that were not written in letters, in words. Like,
no, it was a PowerPoint slides.
I mean, I think for folks at home, the risk there is that PowerPoint is a graphical expression of a complex operation,
A
and
cheat sheet.
it can be interpreted.
Yeah.
In some ways, it gives you a lot of discretion, but also it opens the commander up to a lot of risk because there's an increased risk of misunderstanding that you don't capture the commander's
Yeah,
intent.
but they don't have the risk, right? They don't have the risk. They're sitting at a fob 100 miles away from me where I'm doing the fighting. The risk is
Right.
on me, right? And they purposely stayed away because nobody wants to get close to this force that I've got of 300 to 400 Afghan fighters who could on any given day commit 3 war crimes.
Right.
No shit.
Yeah.
And I can go into that too. But but I would always make my commanders and my staff write a detailed op order, right? And the reason being is because we got to go through the mental cycle, right, of writing these things out on paper and then make sure it's done correctly, the deconfliction. And I'll tell you, my greatest claim, I love the fact that when I wasn't directly responsible for the troops that I was directly responsible for, we didn't lose a single one, not a single one, right? And especially the fratricide. Because if you remember, Pat Tillman just happened then, that time frame. And there's cover up and all that shit. And then at the same time in Iraq, 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines called a mortar fire mission on top of themselves. They lost 3 Marines, a dozen wounded, and all that stuff. Nothing happened to that battalion commander because he's a chosen one, right? Where I didn't have any, and was the most successful battalion at the time, and people still say to this day, so I got hauled in and relieved when we got back to the U.S. Nonetheless, and I'm not playing the victim here, huh?
No, we're going to talk about that because you're not the victim. You got screwed, but we'll talk more about that.
But I don't think so. I view that whole relationship at the end. It was a divorce. I just want to get the hell away from the Marine Corps. I didn't believe in it anymore, and I said I'm moving on. And I kept my mouth shut for 20 some years, right? So if I wanted to be the victim, I could have come out then, but I just kept quiet. And the main reason I kept quiet was I didn't want the young Marines in combat in Afghanistan and Iraq lose their trust and confidence in their senior leadership. So I just kept my mouth shut. And until the Kabul debacle happened, and when I was retiring, my CG, I told him in the out brief, and he's kind of pissed off at me because I didn't get his permission to retire because he wanted to take me to Iraq and give me another command and all that. I said, sir, I'm done. I'm not fighting for this gun club anymore. And he said, normal courtesy is that you talk to CG before you put in retirement papers. I said, normal courtesy is the CG brings you in and asks you what happened, which never did. And I was very, very blunt. Everybody knew me and my style. So nonetheless, so when I'm leaving, I said, I'll tell you something, you keep promoting this guy, one day he's going to make a big mess. And unfortunately, I wasn't wrong. Fast forward, from 17 years later, guess who's in charge of the Kabul withdrawal? The same guy. And that's when it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. And it really pissed me off because, those lives were lost for what? Because some incompetent, commander didn't understand that a commander's first responsibility is to his troops and their force protection. That's your commander's first responsibility, right? And he failed in that. So anyway, we can come back to that part, right? So when the battalion, so when we got up to, so the plan was that we're in Candor. We're going to go roughly about 100 miles north, a place called Tarankot, Oruzgan province, and they're going to establish a fob, right? And the fob was the perimeter was 5 miles long. So they took 400 Marines from me to secure the damn perimeter. 400. My artillery battery gone, 81's gone, and a platoon from Charlie Company gone to
So
guard
you
the
lost
damn
a
perimeter.
third of your combat power.
Yes.
To secure the fob
for the MU headquarters.
Well, and then sorry, please. I'm stunned by that, but please continue.
Yeah, of course, it made no sense. And and my point was, I'm not staying at this damn fob because I want to be out there. I trained these Marines to go find, fix, and finish the enemy. That was my commander's intent. That's 3 words. Lance corporals understand 3 words. They don't need a Gazette article, proceedings or something. It's just simple. So anyway, so I stayed out of that fob for the most part. They'd call me in to chew my ass or some shit, stupid stuff. And so we basically stayed in the hinterlands, and we just kept moving. When you come out of a fob, you can either go straight out the gate, you can take a right or a left, and somebody's sitting there watching you, and they're signaling, to the adversary saying, hey, these guys just went right. You see what I'm saying? With me, they didn't know what the hell I was doing, right? I'd go in one valley, I've got adjacent valley secured, we turn around, go the other way. We were just unpredictable. And once we made contact with the enemy, we just decimated them. I chased them as high as 10,000 feet in the mountains. Great stories. We had to rent donkeys and stuff, take our M2s up there and all our radio comms and all that shit. And it turned out that we found the last element of them, and we called it a B1 strike. Just freaking vaporized them. And that's the mindset you got to have. But these guys were more about, hey, we're a MU, we're a brigade equivalent, and they're trying to show that they're, trying to maneuver these people along the battle space. So when they went to Tarankot, I went to a place called these sets of villages, the 3 villages, that I kind of established in that village area, our operating area. And then, so that's about 60 kilometers from Tarankot, and go directly across, basically a triangle, 60 kilometers, there's checkpoint 231, which is right in front of a pass. And the MU wanted to leave the LAR, the Light Armored Reconnaissance Platoon there, right, to guard the checkpoint. I always had problems with it because it's a platoon that's isolated, right? I can't get there. It'll take me 3 to 5 hours to get there, cross compartment. MU doesn't have the resources to go reinforce them, right? And I used to butt heads with the MU commander. He basically said, don't worry about it. You just worry about your own shit, right? So they're controlling this element. And sure shit, one night we're about ready to launch into an attack or this operation. And, they had these weird names, Blade Runner, Asbury Park, Cadillac Ranch, Bruce Springsteen songs. It sounds sexy in a COC when you're briefing it, but how the hell do you explain that to an Afghan? How do I explain Cadillac Ranch? How do I explain Blade Runner? It's just culturally just disconnected. Anyway, so we're about to launch an attack and this operation, and the LAR was tasked to conduct security operations in that region. And they made contact that night, and we lost Corporal Payne. And I remember getting word on the radio, and we launched. I just sent my cap platoon, to go reinforce, got some helicopters. We launched, we secured the area, and, killed a few guys, but nothing major because we didn't really know. We went through those villages like, find weapons, anything. But anyway, and then all of a sudden the MU changed their views, and because I could have gotten Afghan militia to go guard that checkpoint for $5 a day per person, right? I could put 20 people there, right, for $100 a day, right? $100 a day. I could have checked.
Genghis, the LAR, how far away were they from the nearest adjacent unit? Like, were they isolated out there?
40 to 60 kilometers through a mountain pass.
And they were.
And the only reason that son of a bitch did this, and I'll tell you, I don't mind calling him that because I'll say it to his damn face because I fear no one except God, is because on the map to the CJTF, he want to show, hey, I got a maneuver unit here, I got a maneuver unit here, so I'm a brigade equivalent. Bullshit. You're basically a battalion with 2 headquarters, and you're sucking resources away from your ground combat element. That's what that was the friction, right? And people never understood that. Anyway, so that's when I decided, I just got to distance myself from these clowns, and I just took off in another direction, right? And we'd never really, and I sort of, made alliances with the local militias. And there's one guy who's the governor of Oruzgan province, John Mahmoud Khan. I mean, this guy's a freaking warrior, man. He was incredible, right? I loved the guy. I loved him like a brother. And he taught me about courage. Here's a guy, and I'll send you a picture. He's got a big beard, white beard, and carrying an AK, and he'd assault with his militia, right? But he's a fox. He wants money for everything, right? Uh, and so we had a great working relationship, and things, and because of him, we were successful because he knew the local terrain, he knew where the enemy was, and he knew how to get us there. And I'll tell you what, and so my commander's intent was very simple: find, fix, and finish. We're going to find the enemy by using our local Afghan militia in front of us, with Cat right behind him. I'm right behind Cat. I got my maneuver companies behind me, and we're going to fix the enemy once we find them through Cat opening up with their heavy machine guns or aviation, right? So the Marines knew when the heavy guns opened up that we're in the fixing phase, right? And the finish is, I get on a Charlie company and envelop right, and then we're in the finishing phase. It made sense. It was easy. And once we got this battle drill down, we were untouchable. And I'll tell you this much: the first time that we made contact, and all the Marines turned around and they're looking back. And I remember distinctly standing there going, what the F is this? They're looking back for instructions, because that's how the Marine Corps teaches infantry tactics, right? Squad leaders behind his squad, fire team leaders behind the fire team, right? And we give them hand and arm signals, get online, squad V, and all this bullshit. So what does that do? It takes the Marines' focus off the enemy. He's looking behind. He's going to get, you know what I'm saying? It made no sense. So I got everybody together. I said, hey, we got this wrong. The Marine Corps, doctrinally, we got it wrong. I want every unit leader in front of the damn units. And a couple of staff NCOs and officers said, well, sir, if we're in front of them, we're going to get shot. You know what? So be it. That's what we get paid the big bucks. That's why you earn the rank. And let me tell you something. I'm going to be in front of you as a battalion commander. I'm going to lead this gunfight. And that's what we did. And so that's important, right? So the Marines saw that. It was like, it just changed us into a different unit. We were like, the movie Spartans. There's no mission there that we couldn't accomplish. There's no place that we couldn't go. And there's no enemy that we feared to fight. And the enemy started calling us death walkers on their radios. These Americans are unlike the ones before. Wherever they go, they create death. They're death walkers. That's the name they gave us. And the battalion still uses it to this day. And that's the type of relentless pursuit you got to have, that tenacity, right? We don't have that, because a lot of our senior officers, they're either, not all of them, I know many good generals, they're phenomenal, right? But many of them, they're just low testosterone people. Honestly, they're middle-aged, they're overweight, they're sitting around reading too many damn books, and they don't know how to train Marines. So I've came up in my Sentinel channel that we need a 3-track system. We need a technical track for aviators, for pilots, for weapons officers, for communicators, for cyber, for maintenance guys. They're all technical, right? And they get promoted within their track. Then for the staff, we need a separate track, staff track, right? They know doctrine. They know doctrine really well. They know planning. They understand logistics, and they get promoted within their staff track, right? You can become a general, because a lot of the combatant commanders have generals, right, as J5s and stuff. So, and then finally, you've got the combat track, where you've got these guys that understand how to train units. They're physically fit, they're mentally tough, and they know how to discipline units, and the Marines want to follow them. But now the problem we have is we've got this staff track that basically they know they have to go get command time, so they go back to the fleet for 2 years to get the check in the box. They do minimum amount of training because they don't want to get anybody hurt and get fired, and then you got this mush. And then you got this fire mission that happens, and they kill their own, right? And then the Marine Corps covers it up, just like the Tillman incident. The Marine Corps covered it up for 3 years until Mary Tillman, Pat Tillman's mother, found out about it, and she went to Congress. Congress calls in the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, and he apologized. He apologized that, hey, we're sorry, we covered it up. Because they told all the Marines that it was due to enemy action, which was a freaking lie. And the generals that covered it up was Jim Mattis, right, and Conway, the Commandant of the Marine Corps. One was a division commander, the other one was MEF commander. I mean, it's all on Google. I mean, you can Google this stuff. It's
that was
right
the
there.
one that involved Duncan Hunter.
Yes. Exactly. And Hunter's father went there and had a secret meeting with Conway, allegedly. And and nothing happened to Hunter, right? And it's shameful. Our Marines' lives mean something. It's really that simple. And I don't say a lot of this stuff because in the Patton movie, and I understand it's a movie, but I don't want to go and die for my country. I don't want my Marines dying for us. I want other poor son of a bitch to die for their country. That's how you win wars. But these bastards, they have no freaking gumption. When you lose 13 Marines in Kabul, and then they go in front of a congressional hearing, and the congressman asks McKenzie, "Hey, did you ever speak to Sergeant Vargas Andrews?" And he goes, "No, I haven't." And then the congressman asks him, "Where were you on 26 August?" "Oh, I was in Tampa." "You got to be shitting me. You got the largest withdrawal going on, and you're sitting in Tampa? Well, what kind of logic is that?" "No, I get it. You're a combatant commander. You got shit going on in Syria and all that, but give that to your deputy, man." We had a very simple philosophy. Leaders have to be at the points of friction, failure, and transition. And you remember that scene in the Patton movie, when these armored columns are stuck and there's a traffic jam, and he gets up on a drum and he starts waving people through. Point of friction, right? Or when you're going to transition from amphibious assault to, a conventional ground assault, there's a transition point. You need leaders there. But what we do is we leave it to the young Marines to make decisions, because the leaders don't want to be around there, because something will go wrong, it'll be on them, right? Yeah. So it's very important to have the leaderships in the right places to make decisions.
Genghis, I love this. This is exactly what I was hoping to get, in the conversation between you and me. What I see then, taking a step back, is you've got this very complex fight that you have to fight, and you have a very simple philosophy: find, fix, finish. And you have communicated that to your Marines. You've communicated that to your Afghan partners, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And that's your primary concern, is to do that. But as a commander of the BLT, you've got this additional task, which is you're having to manage up, right? And what they're trying to do is something that, based upon what you're telling me, is they're trying to proof this concept that a MEU can do basically what an army brigade can do. And they have this as a primary focus. You on the ground have a very simple but very critical focus, which is to defeat the Taliban. And for the junior officers who are listening to this discussion, the higher up you're going to go, you have to expect that. You're at an inflection point of your career as a battalion commander, where you are focusing on the fight, but then you also have to be concerned about what goes on above. And it shouldn't be that way. There should be complete unity of effort from top to bottom, but you didn't find yourself in that.
It should be, and I agree with you, but quite frankly, I never serviced what was above me. I really didn't. I just didn't care. If I didn't agree with something, I'd tell my OPSO to handle it, or tell my XO to handle it. And there's parts that really pissed me off. So the first part was, we were all done. We were done, and we really hadn't done anything, right? We hadn't done anything up to this point, and we're all ready to go to Candor. I get a call from a militia leader, Shadi Jan, right, saying, "Hey, the Taliban surrounded his district headquarters. He needs help." So I said, "Shadi Jan, I just need to get permission. I'll be there." And I'm thinking I'll get my cat, and me and my cat will go down and we'll fight it up. And so I go to the MUCO. I was like, "Hey, can I go to Candor rather than the checkpoint 231 route? Can I go the other route?" And so he goes, "Yeah, by then it's all over." So he didn't realize, and I didn't either. I'm just thinking I'll go down to Shadi Jan's and then get to Zabul province, Deshopan, and we'll get to Kabul, right? And so we decided to take the entire BLT, right? Minus the people that are left behind guarding the fob. And we commenced to making contact with the enemy. So for the next 17 days, we fought through these mountain passes. Every day we fought, And I had a great intel officer that would do his IPB, and he would always predict, "Sir, we're going to get ambushed here."
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because there's orchards here. After the ambush, they're going to break contact, go to the orchards to eat, and there's a stream there. That's where they're going to get their water. So we made those into engagement areas, right, with aviation and reconnaissance. And when the enemy broke contact, we're a step ahead of the enemy. They're going to these orchards, and we're taking them out. I got a great clip of a Cobra coming in and taking them out. We commenced this fighting, and the fight went on, and we finally made it to Deshopan. Right? We're freaking done. We're toast. My vehicles are toast. Everything is done. The MEU commander flies in, and he's getting pictures taken with me, and he's telling me, "Hey, I'm going to put you in for a Silver Star, blah, blah, blah," and all this happy horse shit, right? And so he flies back, then he calls me on the radio. He goes, "Hey, Genghis, I got good news." I'm like, "What's that, sir?" He goes, "We just got extended, so I want you to come back." And I'm like, "You got to be shitting me." I said, "We're done. My Marines are tapped out. My vehicles are tapped out. You know, we're going to Condor, and I don't think the Afghans are going to follow me." No, 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 you got to come back to Fob Ripley. So I'm pissed. So I remember throwing the handset down. I walked off to this bluff area, and my opso came up to me, and he's like, "You all right, sir?" And I had tears in my eyes. You know what I mean? Because fuck.
You've
I mean,
been
I'm still
fighting
getting
for
choked
4
up
straight
thinking about it.
months.
Yeah.
You guys are out in sector fighting for 4 months. You weren't
Well,
FOB.
4 months we were operating, but the 17-day stretch was tough. I mean, it just drained us, right? And I told my opsos, the son of a general, I said, Brian, you're going to be a general officer one day, and don't you ever fucking forget this day. Don't ever treat your Marines like this. And I bucked up and I said, you know what? We're Marines. We're going to do it. I got my Marines together. I said, hey, gents, I don't like the decision. We're Marines, and we're going to execute. We got to go back. I go talk to my Afghan militia, John Mahmoud Khan, and he's like, I'm not going back with you. I'm going to Condor. All my vehicles are trashed and all this stuff. I said, fine, John Mahmoud. I understand. I get it. So we go to the intersection. I take a right to go back. He's supposed to take a left. I get a call on the radio that John Mahmoud Khan's following us. I pull over. I go and meet him, and he's like, I couldn't let you go. You're my brother. So I remember hugging him. I mean, that's the type of camaraderie you need, and I needed him. And then we fought, and we ended up 10,000 feet up in the mountains, and it turned out very successful. We get up to Fob Ripley, they used to call it the Mu Fob, and I get orders now to go north of Terran Cup because according to them, we pushed the enemy back, and they've moved to the north. It's all bullshit. Enemy doesn't fight Napoleon tactics.
The Taliban.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah, so it was all, and I was like, who the hell came up with this? Well, we've got national assets that are telling, fuck your national assets, man. I got people on the ground that are telling me real shit. And so anyway, so we go to the north, Charchene area, and nothing really happens. Some minor firefights and all that shit, river crossing and all that. Then we came back, and then so before that, he got us extended for another week to be able to do this operation. So he became the CJTF main effort. The commanding general with all his brigade commanders flew down to his FOB, and we got a dog and pony show going on.
Mhm.
And I'm not a dog and pony show type guy, right? And they wanted me, and I told them, I said, you don't want me briefing anything because somebody asked me the question, I'm going to unload. So keep me the hell out of it, right? And so finally there was a Q&A because everybody wanted to know our success, right? Why were we so successful? It was because of the Afghans we had, because of the Marines training. Our success started back in Camp Lejeune. It didn't happen in Afghanistan. It started probably 6 months prior when I was training them. That's what leads to success. And anyway, so we go to Charchin area, we come back, and it's done, right? And we're done. And he wants to fly. He wants me to fly with them because his FOB even had an airstrip. Believe it or not, I mean, this is crazy shit. And I said, I'm not flying. I'm going back with my Marines. And when we got to Condor, I remember the vehicle in front of me, the tire came off, right? The axle hit a rickshaw, crowd forms. Condor Air Base launches the QRF. We got helicopters flying on. They're just adding to the chaos. I told everybody, just go send these damn helicopters back. I got it. I give the rickshaw driver $200. I said, hey, we good? Oh, he's happier than hell, And so he goes, easily solved, right? Yeah, I mean, it's easy. But the issue that I had was before we left was we had a staff meeting, and the MUCO said that everybody that was at the FOB was going to get the combat action ribbon, combat infantryman's badge, right?
Mhm.
But these guys never saw combat. And I had Marines get killed and wounded and shit. And we're giving these pogues back there combat action ribbon. I mean, it's a slap in the Marines' courage, right? With the ones that endured. So I kept in the staff meeting, I kept my mouth shut. I went up to him afterwards. I said, I don't agree with you. So he goes, well, it's not your call. So I said, I understand that. But when we get back to Camp Lejeune, I'm going to bring it up. I'm just being honest with you. And that kind of created this problem, right? So they listed, and I've got the write-ups and stuff, if you want to see it, 28 incidents that why they deserve the combat action ribbon. 23 of them were the BLT. 23 of them were the BLT fighting 100 kilometers away. The other 5, one was an airplane coming into land, received fire. We don't know celebrity fire because for a wedding or a baby is born, they're shooting guns up in the air. But you can't claim that. Maybe the people in the airplane get the air medal or some shit, right? But everybody in the FOB getting the combat action ribbon, that's bullshit. There's 2 rounds that were fired at the FOB, 7s, and they failed to detonate outside the FOB, right? There's another case where the FOB exchanged fire with these they claim were Taliban. Turns out they were John Mahmoud Khan's external security for the FOB. that the MEU failed to coordinate.
So a blue
Right?
on green incident.
Yeah. And then there's another case where there's a patrol about 8 kilometers away from the FOB. They got in a firefight, and they put that in there. Well, that patrol definitely gets the combat action ribbon, but the FOB doesn't. So his policy was anybody that spent the night on the FOB would get the combat action ribbon. You know what started happening? People were flying up from Candor, literally holding on to the skids of helicopters, to come spend the night. Right at dusk, they'd come in there, spend the night, morning, the helicopter go back, and, hey, I got another ribbon, It's just
Combat tourism.
complete prostitution of who we are as Marines, right? So that created a problem. And then when we got to Candor later on, the first combat award that's given to the MEU commander, a Bronze Star. I got a picture of it. He got awarded a Bronze Star. Now, that's up to the commanding general, but give me a freaking break, man. We have not recognized a single Marine yet.
So your Marines hadn't received their awards.
No, not a single Marine. I'd given out Navy Achievement Medals that, I'm authorized to give out to keep people motivated, but I'm talking about the actual combat awards had not been done yet. And this guy gets a Bronze Star pinned onto him, and I was just fucking disgusted. And I was sitting there with the assistant division commander, for the CGATF, assistant commander, 1 star, and we're having breakfast on a side table, and the CG is talking to the Marines, a squad of my Marines having breakfast with them, and all of a sudden they call attention to orders, pop up, and they read the citation, they put on a Bronze Star on this clown. And I'm just disgusted. And the brigadier general asked me, he goes, Genghis, you have done incredible things. He goes, you want to be the aide to Peter Pace? I can make it happen. You tell me what you want done. And I told him, I said, sir, I'm retired. So this is in August, right? And he literally, coffee came out of his mouth. He's like, what? I said, for shit like that. And he goes, yeah, you're right. And that's not the Marine Corps I joined. And I wasn't going to compromise my ethics and my core values, right? And I wasn't going to prostitute my Marines for it. That's why I just kept my mouth shut. And now, Marines are contacting me in droves.
Yeah. And just for the listeners at home, Genghis is a guy that can still do 20 pull-ups. He PTs every day. He's a freaking stud. This isn't a guy that just got broken down by the experience and says, I've had enough. Your decision to leave was a principal one.
Yes.
That's what this is about. This isn't about you breaking down physically and mentally. This is about the institution basically not meeting your standards.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, and it's not the standards, it's the trust that our young Marines have in us. They trusted me with their lives. They trust me for their well-being. They trust me with their training. For me, the Marine Corps is never a job. It was an obsession, right? Every waking moment, I thought about how can I train my Marines better? How can we be more lethal? How can we be more mentally tough? Even when I slept, I thought about this shit. I dream about it, and I write it down, notes. And, next morning I go in battalion, and we try it out. And that's the way it's got to be. It can't be a 7 to 4 type job. That's bullshit. And the Marines expect that of you. The trust. At the beginning, we talked about the trust. The families in America trusted me. Forget the part that I'm an immigrant, but I had a fiduciary duty to give it my all. That's what it's all about.
Now, you had an embedded reporter who published false reporting about detainee abuse and then did a hit piece on one of your officers. And I'll let you talk about that, but I'll just preface it by saying, what really bothers me about this is not so much the reporter, that stuff happens, I'm not going to talk about reporters, but you can expect that stuff, right? Misunderstandings or in some cases hit pieces. But what really pisses me off about it is just really how the MEU commander and the Marine Corps leadership at the highest levels responded to these allegations, basically telling you to trust the process. And can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's an important teaching point for junior leaders who are listening to this.
Sure. So the MEU wanted to play this brigade thing, right? Hey, we're a brigade equivalent, right? And they also wanted recognition. So they're inviting all these reporters and stuff and embedding him with that. And, I've got 80 some vehicles. I've got hundreds, 600, 700, 800 people on these missions with us. The last thing I want to do is deal with the reporter. So I'd hand him off to whoever the PAO person was. And there's 7, and some of them did some great stories. There's another guy, that did a great story on us, and he refuted what this lady said, and she was an Australian reporter, and she had an agenda, and she didn't really lie. She just misspoke, right? Because there were Afghans that claimed they were mistreated, sexually abused, right? Because in Afghanistan, when you're taken as a prisoner or a detainee, you're taken to a detainee handling facility run by the MU at their fob. And at that facility, the medical officers have you stripped down and they check you. Well, in the Afghan culture, that's bad news, right? Was stripping males down in front of other males and stuff. So that's what the problem was. And it was easily explainable. That's all they had to say. Yeah, this happened, and this is the reason why it happened. End of story, right? And then she captured that officer who's the battery commander. I won't take any names, working for the MU. He was under the MU at that time, that entire time, guarding their fob. And because we got extended, he's trying to keep the Marines motivated. And he's yelling at him, hey, you better stay alert, blah, blah, blah. Do you hear me? And he shoves a Marine, right? Like a coach would, okay? And not that I tolerate it. So anyway, so I have no idea this shit's going on. We're setting sail back home, and I got called in and said, hey, have you seen this? No, I haven't. Well, you got to relieve this officer. I said, for what? You know, for this incident. I said, I'm not going to relieve him. Well, the MEF commander wants to relieve him. I said, well, he can relieve him. I'm not doing it. Right. And the problem with that was, and I said, I'll counsel him. It's not a big deal. What he did was wrong. I understand, but you got to put it in context. Just got extended. He's trying to keep the Marines alert. And when the investigation happened, not a single Marine in that platoon said it was assault. Not a single one. They understood it. They played football in high school and all that shit. Anyway, so that poor guy gets relieved, right? And on YouTube, there's a video of this, and everybody says it's me, right? I kept quiet about it because I knew it wasn't me. I know the truth, right? And now it's coming out, and I just accepted it. And everybody said, "Oh, that's why Khan got relieved because he shoved him." That's bullshit. And it wasn't me, right? I wasn't even there. I was 100 kilometers away. So because of Abu Ghraib had just happened, right? So everybody's really sensitive to that, and the Marine Corps didn't have the cojones to, say, "Hey, explain it," and American people will understand it. But what they do is they find these sacrificial lambs, and we eat our own, and we throw people under the bus, and then we destroy families and we destroy careers without thinking twice about it. And it's fundamentally wrong. That's not the Marine Corps I joined. Semper Fidelis, always faithful, means something.
Yes.
That's my point.
Yeah. I mean, I over far less important things, I have blown my top before, and I've had NCOs pull me aside, check me. I've had, in some cases, more senior officers pull me aside and say, JM, that was unprofessional. You need to make that right with your guys. But the idea that because I saw the video on YouTube, the idea that something like that would make its way to the MEF commander, I just found that to be really that's overkill. That could have been easily taken care of, like in a 30-minute conversation about professionalism, etc. And it's done.
Yeah. And I think what happened was the MEF commander was onto something, right? Because the Marine Corps is really worried about Abu Ghraib and this SBS Dateline report that came out. And they couldn't want to explain it away, but the MEF commander started asking questions about the MU. And the MU had a couple of incidents, accidental discharges in the COC and all that. Those people didn't get relieved, right? So they had a double standard. And so I think, in my opinion, I say this because, I don't know what the background information was, that the MU wanted to turn the spotlight onto somebody else. So they picked the BLT. Khan is tough. All this stuff happened. This officer did this because of Khan's leadership stuff. I wasn't there. You were responsible for that unit. They were chopped
sliced
to
over.
You.
They were chopped out to the MU, right?
Yes, the MU was responsible for them, just like at checkpoint 231. The MU is responsible for all this shit, right? I'm a man. If I did something wrong, I'll say, yeah, I screwed up, no problem. Okay, but this is the type of games they played. So he kind of turned the spotlight on me, and it came up with this bogus investigation. And and that's when I said, you know what, screw this. I'm not even going to answer it. They can go F themselves.
In your video, you mentioned that some of the investigating officers who were staff officers and not commanders were undermining you because they were going directly to Marines and talking to them about, hey, there's an investigation that's coming down. Yep. Did I capture that correctly? Or
yeah. And what happened was on one operation, I believe it was a 17-day operation, we came back, and this is later on I find out, right? And what had happened was some Terp, one of the MU's contract Terps, made an allegation against me that I beat him up. It's physically impossible. Could I beat him up? Absolutely. I know what I'm capable of. Did I? Absolutely not, because I was never alone. I always had people around me, right? So he made this allegation. So that precipitated an investigation, which is fine. Investigate the damn thing, right? But it wasn't substantiated, and it's simply being because I was never alone. There had to be witnesses. There's no witnesses. Now, this guy's making an allegation. Later on, I find out because he sprained his ankle, he wanted to go back, and I refused. I wasn't going to bring in a helicopter to ship his ass back, so I put him in a vehicle and go with him. Maybe that was the reason. Maybe ethnically, he didn't like me. I don't know the reason, right? So, and then you got the investigating officer going around waking up Marines in the middle of the night. Hey, did you wash the battalion commander's clothes? You got to be shitting me. I never changed my clothes. I don't wear skivvies. I wore the same freaking camis for 100+ days. And I would never ask a Marine to wash my clothes. It's not my leadership style, right?
No way.
So just stupid shit. Because what that does is it's very Machiavellian, right? Oh, people are asking questions now. And they turned a couple of officers for the wrong reasons, because I chewed somebody's ass. Yeah, damn right, I chewed every. You weren't doing your job. You'd hear it straight from me. And maybe they had reasons for that. I don't know who they are because I've read the investigation. I know exactly who said what, but I don't hold it against them. They were manipulated into making those statements. That's fine, no problem. So when we came back and we're on ship, the second investigation starts, which was another aviation officer who works directly for Mackenzie, junior to me, does an investigation. And in that investigation, here's a classic. Oh, I love it. It's a command investigation. And when I got called in and say, we got to do a command investigation on you, MEF commander wants it. I said, you don't need to do on me. I'll tell you right now, it sucks. The shit that we went through, morale sucks, man. We're beaten. I've lost weight. I've lost 20, 25 pounds. Anyway, so they start this investigation. So this is a command investigation of the BLT. The first statement they take is from the MU adjutant, a female Marine officer, right? I'll say her name because I have the statement. I'm talking facts here. Marissa Serrano. And she claimed that I hit my adjutant so hard that his head bounced off his shoulder. Never happened. I go to my adjutant's statement, right? And he says, I never hit him. So now she gave a statement, false statement under oath, but she wasn't held accountable. And why would you go outside a command to get a statement when it's a command climate investigation on the BLT? Why would you get statements from people outside? So it was a hit job. It was all bullshit. And the only way I found out about this is these idiots charged me when we got to Lejeune. When they found out, like, holy shit, now the Marine Corps is on an uproar. There was a general officer saying, you fired the wrong guy. I was on the fast track and all that bullshit, right? So then they realized, holy shit, we screwed up. So they charged me. Conduct unbecoming an officer, right? And assault. And that was a fatal error they made because when they charged me, they had to show me the evidence to my lawyers. So I got this big binder and I kept it for 20-some years. I have it. And as a result of that, so I got brought in front of the SJA and they're talking, the hearing. And what's the first charge? Assault. Okay, what's the specifications? I admitted, I said I grabbed my radio operator under fire.
Under fire.
Under fire, right? And I probably grabbed his arm or his H harness or something, right? Pull him towards me to, hey, do you understand me? So I said, fine. I did do that, But I also remember Commandant L. Gray smacking me in the back, telling me I'd done a good job. So if mine is assault, then we need to bring Al Gray here and charge him with assault too, because they're both assault, right? And they go, yeah, you're right, And so many generals have smacked me right on the back. The next, okay, what's the next charge? Conduct unbecoming an officer. What's the specifications? Use the F word. I said, I did. I said, you're fucking right, I did. Just like that, because they knew me, I said, but then we got to bring the MEF commander down here and the MU commander, put them under oath and ask them if they've used the F word ever in uniform, because I've heard them. I've got witnesses. And the JAG's like, you know what? This is all bullshit. Charges drop. Go away. And but the mistake they made was I had access privy to the investigation. And I could have rebutted it. I could have said, this is wrong, this is wrong. But, I am not going to, kowtow to another human. It ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen. I don't give a shit who you are. You want my career? Fucking take it. I'm a better man. And let me tell you something else. Neither the MEF commander or the MU commander could have done what I did. Forget what my Marines did, but I'm talking about what I did because the Afghans wouldn't follow them. The Afghans used to call the MU commander Chugwarai, means a plump lamb. They used to call him a plump lamb, right? And I tell him to knock it off. He's call him Colonel Mackenzie. So, so that's the whole thing, and that's fine. It was something that happened. I have no regrets. I would do it exactly the same way. Knowing the outcome, I would do it exactly the same way. But I'm not gonna get on my knees and say, "Oh, please forgive me my career." And all. Fuck you, man. You're a nobody. I don't give a shit. You got 3 stars. You got 4 stars. You couldn't have done what we did. Go away. That's the truth. And here's the funny part. The MEF commander later on became Colonel of the Marine Corps, and he got hammered for undue command influence. Hammered, right? And he also lied. He lied throughout his entire career that he'd gone to the basic school. He never did. He made it up. So then, he basically walked into a PX, grabbed some Eagle Globe and anchors, and walked out as a Marine. He was a Navy aviator. The Marine Corps needed aviators. So he crossed deck, and all he had to say is, look, I didn't go to TBS. Nobody cares, right? Nobody gives a shit. But when you're going to lie about it in congressional, hearings and stuff, because you have to present your bio, and people called him out on it. Then the Marine Corps started tap dancing. Well, he didn't go to TBS, but he took the non-residence course. Come on, man. You don't need to make up shit. We're better than this.
You did a video, and I thought it was perfectly timed. It had to do with like veterans who kind of, I'll just say it, they're untruthful, they lie, they embellish like their records.
Yes.
What it seems to be occurring. Maybe it's because of social media and recency bias and all that kind of stuff, but it seems to me like to be happening a lot more often now than it did like when I was a junior officer. That stuff didn't really happen, but it seems now like we see a lot more of that kind of stuff. What do you attribute that to? Why can't people just be proud of their service?
Insecurity. All this shit doesn't start all of a sudden, right? It goes all the way back to the beginning of their career. So if you bring in a turd that's got no integrity, at some point he's going to compromise it. And the same thing happens in officers, right? Because they want to get ahead. They'll step over anybody to do that, right? And then they start embellishing. I mean, you look at any sit rep, op rep, anything in Iraq or Afghanistan, they're full of lies. And the troops see this shit. The troops are not immune to it. They see it in spades, and they're like wondering what the hell's going on. We're taught integrity, we're taught honor, but these guys are lying. They see it, so it starts right there and then, right? I mean, why would you want a combat action ribbon if you haven't gotten in a gunfight? Why would you do that? So it's these little embellishments that they make along the way. Then the other one is the Jason Bourne syndrome. Everybody wants to be cool as hell, right? Everybody wants to be somebody. But don't lie about it. Just be thankful. I consider anybody that raised their right hand and joined the service to be a national hero. Every one of us, and there's always people that have done greater things and people done less things, but every one of us done the same service, right? So there's no reason to lie. There's no reason to embellish. Just be yourself and tell the truth, that's it. And I think a lot of the veterans are doing it for money because now on social media, you want subs and you want clicks and you want all this shit, right? Because you're getting paid by YouTube or whatever, right? I don't do it for money. I mean, people have been begging me to sell merch and do all this shit. I'm not doing it. I do it for the truth. I don't want anybody to say, hey, Khan's doing it for the money. He's trying to make more subs. I don't even say on my videos, please hit like, subscribe, and all that shit. The earlier videos I did because I didn't know what I was doing, right? But I know I was never comfortable with it. But now I just stopped saying it. If you like my words, you'll come back. If you don't like my words, it doesn't matter what I say, right? So just be honest. Americans want authentic people. They want rugged people. That's what America was built upon, the cowboys, right? They want people, and the last authentic person that we had in senior leadership role, in my view, was probably Ronald Reagan. He was just himself, he had flaws, but he'd done some great things. But he was all himself, right? I mean, and I think it starts right at the top. But when our politicians start BSing us and they've got, they're influenced by foreign interests and all that stuff, the whole system starts collapsing on itself. And that's what's happened. And then you see these freaking general officers, right, that retire, and first thing they do is they make a beeline to the military-industrial complex. Every one of them, pretty much, 90%, right? They go in, they work for all these companies. Why? Why are you doing that? And how many of you have contacted the Marines or the soldiers or the sailors that work for you? How many have written to their family on some day that they lost their son? They don't do that shit. It's all an act. It's all bullshit. And I saw it, and that's what just fucking disgusted me. And I said, you know what? I don't want to be part of this gun club anymore. And thankfully, I had, 20 plus years. So I just said, you know what? I retire. And they tried to stop that. They started another investigation. The Commandant of the Marine Corps in Amos. And finally, I found a lawyer, Charlie Gittins. If you remember the EA-6B that hit that gondola in Italy, he was a lawyer for them. And I called him up, and he said, oh, Colonel, Southern drawl, I was waiting to hear from you. Tell me your side of the story. So I did. He said, you willing to go fight this? I said, absolutely. But once I make up my mind, and he said, you willing to go in 60 minutes? I said, done. She said, I'll call you back. He called the Commandant's SJ. He goes, hey, I got this war hero, Silver Star, minority, and he's got a story to tell in 60 minutes. When do you guys want to do this? 8 hours later, I was released.
Wow.
Now, think about that. If they had something on me, freaking bury me. Throw me in the brig. But don't abuse the legal system, to control me. And that's what they did. And that's what they do every time.
I mean, and I've been under investigation for administrative things. And to my discredit, I've told NCOs and officers that I was responsible for, quote, trust the process, let it play out, right? How do you react to that? Like, you hear that stuff all the time, right? I mean,
I remember the MU commander telling me, oh, let the investigation happen, trust the process. And that's when I realized this guy's, one, I didn't trust him. He was just a marshmallow, right? He's Machiavellian. At that time, I didn't know what the word meant. Now I do. And I'd never trusted the process. I ignored it. There's nothing you can do to me. Nothing. You want to get in a duel? I will freaking fight you without a weapon or with weapons. I will do that. That's the only time we're going to, but your paperwork means nothing to me. Go away, man. Go. There's nothing you can do. I'm not going to grovel in front of you about my career. I am not you. I'm cut from a different cloth. Mountains of Afghanistan and Pakistan. That's my code, right? Avon Old Farms. That's my code. The Marine Corps, 15 cycles, teaching the recruits about honor, courage, commitment. That's my code. The trust that my Marines had in me and the trust I had in them. Let me tell you something else. I never understood why officers, battalion commanders and above had a PSD. These guys walking around, pretending they're freaking Secret Service on steroids. What a waste of freaking manpower. And to me, it was disgusting because my Marines don't have a PSD. I never had one, because I have to live with myself and look myself in the mirror. I don't need a PSD. I'll be with the main effort, Marine Rifle Company, and we're each other's PSD. And my Marines write to me all the time, thanking me for bringing them back home. I said, I should be thanking you. We brought each other back home.
Yep.
It's really that simple.
Yep. I mean, that's what it's all about. Genghis, let's theoretically say you get 5 minutes with Secretary Hegseth. What are your recommendations to the Secretary of War about improving our military?
Well, I'm told, I know for a fact that they're watching Sentinel, right? And a lot of people contacted me and said, hey, did you write the speech? No, I didn't write the speech, but a lot of points that I talk about them is in that speech. So I know they're watching Sentinel, and I'm sure they're watching other channels as they should. But they're not watching it because of me and my big mouth. They're watching it because of the comments. The comments is a mirror, right? There's a veterans talking about it. And everybody's, sharing their experiences. So that's very, very important. But if I was Secretary Hegseth, I mean, the first and the foremost that I would say is, select better general officers. That is so critical, and it ought to be based on, objectively, right? On merit. When I was command selected, I didn't tell you this. The Marine Corps has a commander's course. It's like a cocktail hour, right? You go there and you basically hobnob each other. It's just complete bullshit. So I went to the Army's BCTP commander's course. It was rigorous for 2 weeks. Right? 2 weeks. Every day we had to write an op order. We go in simulation. We had to fight it. And there's a gray beard sitting next to you. And every day I'd come out of there sweat. Right? And that made me so much better as a commander. And I was tested. But we don't have a test for command screening. It's based on, whoever you sucked up to and what kind of fitness report you got. And that's not objective, right? That's subjective because they like you in a certain manner. Or you get a dozen Marines wounded, 3 killed. Hey, let's just cover it up. He's a good guy, Bullshit. Okay? So I think the first thing is, screen better commanders. It has to be. And look at the 3-track system. That's very, very important. And the other thing I would tell the secretary is that, make sure that the acquisition process is fixed. It is broken. There is not a single major program that's on budget, on time. Not one, right? So that's a big issue. And I think that has to be done. And the other thing, I would fence off these damn generals and stuff to go work for the military-industrial complex. They're prostitutes, honestly. And they shouldn't be allowed to work for the military-industrial complex. There ought to be a period of 5 years or 10 years that they're not allowed to do that. So I think if you just make these fundamental changes where people focus on war fighting, I think people realize, and what he's doing is great, don't get me wrong, but you can't stand in front of 800 generals or whatever is in there and say, hey, you got to PT more, no beards, standards and all that. That's a company level speech, right? But the big issue is, we're spending the most recent budget that the Senate passed is like $950 some billion. Where's this money going? Where's it going? So I think that's very important. And although the Secretary of War doesn't really handle veterans issue, we have a freaking epidemic going on. And I haven't even hit this yet. I'm starting to. Okay. We've got 22 veterans that kill themselves every day. Think about that. Think about it. Okay. Because these wars never end for them and us. Right? They continue on. And because we realize, we got screwed. And that son of a bitch, I remember the day I got relieved. He asked me, he goes, "You're not suicidal, are you?" Honest to God, I wanted to fucking reach across that desk, grab his little windpipe, and just rip it right out of his fucking throat. How dare you? How dare you ask me that, you fat little shit, you know? How dare you? After all that crap I've been through, you little fat little munchkin is gonna ask me that? And I walked out. I said, "Fuck off." I just left, you know?
I
I could care
really, I
less.
really, I really don't like it when leaders say that because it's a total cover your ass thing to say, and
Exactly.
it's so
Exactly.
disingenuous. You also mentioned Goldwater Nichols reform. I want to give you the
Yeah.
opportunity to kind of go into more detail about that.
Well, I mean, Goldwater Nichols was, understandably was a seminal act, right? Because it sort of brought jointness, forced the services to work together. I wrote a thesis on this, so I know a little bit about it, right? It forced the service to work together, and it was basically because of Operation Eagle Claw, right? We just screwed it up, and we weren't working together. Marine Corps is on its own program, Army, Navy, you know all about this. And Goldwater Nichols basically started, focus on jointness, right? And jointness is good. Trust me, it's good. I'm all about it, but not at the expense of commanding. So what Goldwater Nichols Act mandated that an officer to be eligible for selection for general officer had to have a joint designation, which meant that you had to go work on the joint staff or combatant commands, the joint designated staffs, right? So everybody started bucking for these jobs, every one of them. And I could see my peers doing it, right? I never worked at the Pentagon. I had no freaking interest, you know? I never, no interest. The only time I worked in combat command is when they dragged me down to Tampa. And we'll talk about that in the next one.
Mhm.
That's when I worked there, right? I got fired from there too, by the way. So it's not the first time I got fired, and we'll talk about that. So my point is the Goldwater Nichols Act needs to be amended. I think this joint designation thing needs to be removed or fenced off, right? I think it's really important because we need to change the focus. But if you go to this 3-track system that I'm talking about, that kind of takes care of it, right? We need commanders that know how to command. That's the most important thing. You can have the best staffs out there, but if you got a freaking lamb for a commander leading lions, ain't gonna happen. Let me tell you something. We've got the best freaking troops. We got the best equipment. We got the best training. I know this. You know it. But where we lack is leadership. And what's happened is the good leaders that are raised to that position, high level position, they're handcuffed. No, they just keep their mouth shut and they look down because they know if they say something, and I know 2 stars that have spoken to me personally because they've voiced their opinions. The commandant invited them for dinner, and next morning, asked them a couple of questions. The guy spoke to him truthfully. Next morning, assistant commandant calls him up because, hey, you need to retire. I mean, you got to be shitting me. And this guy's a warrior. They told me this, a warrior. Just a good guy. So we don't want to keep these good guys that were intimidated. They're always raising the bar, right? Because these guys can't keep up. And the commandant at the time was, Dave Berger. I mean, I taught Dave Berger because I used to teach at MSTP. He's not the smartest light bulb in the room. Nice guy, somebody I want my sister to marry, but he's not a combat commander. He's just too quiet. Marines.
Yeah, I really appreciate your candor, Genghis. I obviously did a little bit of research, talked to guys that know you. You have a reputation for being a no bullshit, straight shooting means Marine, and I part of why I want to do this project is I want to hear veterans' unfiltered opinion. You really delivered the goods today, and what I propose is we'll do another episode that's kind of lined up with the release of your book because I want you to be able to talk about your book so at the high level and kind of some of your key things, and then we'll also talk about like your early days in Afghanistan because it's like an incredibly interesting story. But I just want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, John Mark. I mean, I just want to make sure people understand that. I take no pleasure in criticizing the institution that has faithfully served. I take zero pleasure out of it.
Mhm.
And the only reason I'm criticizing because I want it to improve. Because I don't want my grandchildren to go through what their father, their grandfather went through. And that's so damn important. And that's the only way we're going to improve if we're honest with each other. And, a lot of stuff I say, I will never claim to be right. I throw these thoughts out there so we can have a discourse, freedom of speech, built on the foundation of disagreement. That is so damn important. And I wish the Marine Corps well. I wish my Army brethren well. I wish all the services well. And to me, everybody's a hero that joins them. We got to treat them like heroes, not like roadkills.
Yep, absolutely.
That's the bottom line.
And
So I appreciate this time, and I'll see you at the next episode, and we can talk about anything you want.